I think being a good doctor is not just knowing everything or not knowing everything. It's knowing what you do know and what you don't know, and then working towards a goal that would work for the patient in their best interest.
Welcome to the Specialty Café Podcast, a podcast hosted by the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. My name is Harley Bray. I'm an OBGYN resident at the University of Manitoba, and today we have a very special episode because we get to chat with one of my very own teachers, somebody that I look up to, somebody that I'm always excited to see on the other side of the drape, Dr. Faisal Siddiqui. So thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure, Harley.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So you wear a lot of different hats. You are an anesthesiologist. You are the medical director of the surgical ICU. What initially drew you to anesthesia?
Sure. So I did an undergrad in physiology, like human physiology, and one of the interesting things that I saw in my undergrad was like how the body works, how the systems work together, and the interplay between the cardiac system, the respiratory system, the GI tract. So I really enjoyed what I learned in undergrad. When I got into medical school, I really wanted to be a psychiatrist because my dad was a psychiatrist and I thought this is what I really like. And so I did like summer projects in psychiatry. I did a 3-month elective in psychiatry.
Oh, wow.
And at the end of the 3-month elective, I realized that I like the knowledge that you gain and like the ability to talk to people and help them. But I didn't like the speed at which things got better. And it was kind of a realization in myself that like that's not going to keep me satisfied as I go further in my career. So then I was searching for an opportunity or something else, and one of my friends had said, well, you know, chronic pain has a lot of psychiatry associated with it, and it's a branch of anesthesia. So I started to do some electives, and anesthesia was relatively competitive the year I started, and there was no electives available in anesthesia, but there was an elective available in the ICU. So one of the people who was in the ICU that month was a anesthesiologist, so I said, I'll try that as an elective, and I did that, and then I'm like, oh, this is all application of the physiology and pharmacology that I learned in undergrad, and you saw change really quickly, so I really enjoyed that. And then I was like, okay, if I want to do ICU, how do I get there? And when I looked at like the different paths, which are like, you know, internal medicine, general surgery, emergency medicine, one of the benefits of anesthesia was that I got to use my hands on a daily basis to do procedures. I got to use my brains on a daily basis to understanding physiology and pharmacology. But then I also had that like really broad level of knowledge where you have to know from pediatrics to geriatrics, you have to know a little bit of everything about medicine. So it just took off. That was where my interest really stemmed.
That's so interesting because I feel like most people wouldn't see a pivot from psychiatry to anesthesia, but that connection through chronic pain is really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and I remember that in Med 1 and Med 2, everyone knew I wanted to do psychiatry because I was not shy about it. And then when I realized that wasn't where my career aspirations lay, people were kind of like a little surprised. The people that I worked with. But in the end, like, you know, I think most medical students start off thinking they want to be one thing, and then they learn what it's like and realize that maybe I actually need something different. And I'm just very fortunate that I was able to find that.
Yeah. So we had a case together where we were working together, and there were other staff that were involved that made it challenging. And after the case was done, we sort of passed each other in the hallway, and you had said to me, you said, Harley, don't ever forget to be a good doctor. And so I was wondering, how has your definition of being a good doctor changed over your career?
So I remember the case well, and I remember the distress that we all went through as a team at that time. The idea of being a good doctor when you're a medical student is learn all the stuff, know everything, have it all in your brain. Whenever someone asks you a question, know the answer right away. When you get to residency, it's like, oh, great, I only have to know this narrow area of medicine. I can just be smart about this part. And then when you get later on in your career or past the point of like the Royal College exam, what ends up happening is you realize that being a good doctor is not always knowing everything, but knowing where to look it up knowing how to find the answer and recognizing that your narrow area of expertise is one piece of the care that a patient requires. And so knowing that we're really playing a team sport where, Harley, the story that I think you're referring to, you were in R2 and I was attending for a while. And I still turn to you to say, you know more about this part. Tell me what you're going to do and how it's going to happen. And I can tell you more about my part because we both had the same goal, and that was the patient, right? So now I think being a good doctor is not just knowing everything or not knowing everything. It's knowing what you do know and what you don't know, and then working towards a goal that would work for the patient in their best interest, irrespective of your ego, my ego, and the other things that are happening around. It's always about that's someone's loved one, that's someone's partner, someone's child, someone important in that bed, and one day it'll be me. So I hope that when I work in the OR, in the ICU, or in just in the hospital, I tell people, I'm like, learn this, because if you're taking care of me, I will be very angry if you don't remember this. Yeah. Right? And so being a good doctor is recognizing that we're taking care of ourselves, not just the people in front of us.
Yeah, 1,000%. And one of the other roles that you've had over your career is working with Manitoba's Gift of Life program and transplant program. Yeah. And so you've been a physician where you've had to have these really tough conversations with families when they've lost a loved one about organ donation. How do you just navigate those really hard conversations?
Yeah. Anesthesia doesn't lend itself to longitudinal relationships with families. We're pretty episodic care. Psychiatry is all longitudinal relationships. Critical care is an interesting aspect of my training where intense short-term interactions where you meet people on the worst day of their life, their families are in crisis, and you're having a conversation about some pretty serious things. Transplant and donation, which is the side of transplant that I work on. I don't work as much on the recipient side. On the donation side is always a situation where someone's life is coming to an end, right? The hopes, dreams, and prayers of the family are ending with a decision about whether or not they want to consider transplantation or donation of organs. So I find that the skills that I learned in psychiatry and communication, the skills that I learned in critical care about the physiology and the knowledge, the skills that I have in anesthesia in terms of procedures provides me the ability to work really closely with families, really closely with patients to understand their physiology and what we can do to make them better. And a lot of humility to recognize that this person that I'm talking to invariably is not the actual patient, but is their loved one who is going through a catastrophic event in their life. And so, it's always building on something else. Kind of like you learned addition in grade 1 or grade 2, and then you learn about how they use letters as numbers in grade 6, and then, you learn about calculus in high school and university. It's just building those skills over time. And I think that's how we can have these conversations with families.
So I've had the privilege of being your student, and I went to the ICU with you, and so I got to see you have really hard conversations with patients and their families. And one thing that I'll never forget, and I don't think I've told you this, and that I try to take with me now when I care for patients, is when you go and talk to them, you say, I'm going to care about your loved one as if they're my family, which I think is a really deep and meaningful way to express how much you care about your patients. So balancing that humanity piece that you talk about and empathy with also making those really acute critical decisions, how are you able to sort of balance those things?
It's an interesting problem it's an interesting experience to be that closely related to people at such difficult time. One of the reasons why I tell families that I care for you like I care for my family is because every time I'm tired and cranky and hungry or whatever, I'm just but if that's my mom, what am I going to do? Right? And it helps to ground me to avoid some of the things that get in the way of decisions or smart decisions is like, but I really want to go do this right now, right? But I have to be here right now. So it helps to keep me focused on the goal that I have, which is care for this person the best way that I can. It is a strong support network of colleagues, my family, the people around me, my faith. They help to manage those issues, right? Like I have days when I come home and I'm like, I tell my kids, I'm like, remember, Daddy does not want CPR, right? Or remember that death is not the worst outcome, right? Like there are so many things that are worse than death. So, and I come home and I'll hug my wife and I'll hug my kids and I'll be like, today's a bad day, but tomorrow I can do better, right? So I think that like the way that you balance those unfortunate situations is recognizing what you can do, what you can't do, and also taking solace in the people and the community around you, right?
Yeah,
they really do.
That reframing that you talk about, and sometimes you're so deep in it, and you're like, I just need to take a step back and reframe what has just happened. Yeah,
all the time. Yeah.
You are also really involved with medical education, and so coming in July, we have a brand new cohort of R1s that'll be starting. What is a piece of advice that you would give an R1 on their very first day of residency?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is to recognize this is a marathon, not a sprint. Med school is such a strange experience where for 2 years, you do a very, very concentrated version of undergrad, where 4 years of going to classes, for 2 hours a day for 5 days a week, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, it's 8 hours a day for like 2 years. And you're like, man, you never feel like you can keep up on the material. Yeah. And then you go to clerkship and all of a sudden it's that stuff you learned in the textbook doesn't matter. But that's the biggest transition when you start getting your clinical rotations done. Then when you get to the point of the residency, you feel like I'm done. I know what I'm going to be. Like there's a lot of a feeling of like this is the last step, but recognize it's the next step. Yeah, right. Like it is
certainly in a finish line.
Exactly, because once you finish your 2 years or your 5 years or your 7 years or whatever it is that it takes to finish the specialty you've chosen, you'll always be learning more. And the transition at the end of residency to attending is a small transition compared to the transition you already underwent from Med 2 to Med 3.
Yeah.
Right? Like you learn how to sleep in a hospital.
Yeah.
you learn what to do. Yeah. You learn where to find food at 3 a.m. Right? You also learned how to manage yourself when you're tired. So I think that like for the R1s just starting, I really hope they recognize that it is a marathon, not a sprint, so you don't have to learn it all in one day. And build yourself support networks and take care of yourself along the way. Because this is the lifelong pursuit of perfection that we'll never reach. We'll never cure death, but we want to make people's lives better, and that's what we can do.
Yeah, and I think in R1 too, there's a lot of firsts, right? There's good firsts, there's bad firsts.
Oh yeah.
First order you write, first patient you lose, first code blue. What are some things that people can do to sort of get through some of those tough firsts? Because I know we all have them.
Oh yeah. I trust the people that I work with because we came through this together. I know I've said this to you and I say it to a lot of medical students, like as soon as you start this medical path, you're a colleague. And so if you're having a bad day, you should find the friend who you can talk to about it, because invariably in the hospital system, there is someone else who's had that same experience who knows, wow, I remember what that felt like. We should talk about it, right? So I think that like the social supports that we create amongst ourselves is the best way to manage those negative firsts. I think celebrating our positive firsts takes the same people, right? You kind of want to high five some people. Sometimes you need to give them a hug, but it's usually the same people that you're going to go to. So work on those connections, work on those relationships, because your sanity as you go through your training will be maintained, because the first time you're in attending and something happens and it's your name on the chart, it's going to be the same problem, right? So you do want to have them build that rapport with people.
Well, and we're so busy all the time that sometimes we don't have that time necessarily to debrief or talk about these things. And so I know something that I've seen you do well is everybody just stop, and it's the nurses, it's the med students, it's the attendings, everybody gathering to share what just happened and how is everybody doing. So that's something I think is really nice.
No, and debriefing difficult situations, if you can in the moment, is great, because 20 people watching the same situation unfold will have 20 different perspectives on what went wrong and what we can do better. A lot of times, though, it's so busy you don't have time to do it in the moment. You have to do it after the fact, and that's where the people around you really support you.
Yeah, those moments are very, very dear, as I would say. One of my last questions is, I think a lot of our R1s are stressed about making mistakes, and mistakes are inevitable. But how should trainees approach these moments where maybe they did make a mistake and it did impact patient care and moving forward with that?
So there was a internist in Winnipeg named Ken Vandermeed who recently passed away. I remember that when I was a medical student, I had a patient outcome that was unexpected and poor. And I remember Ken saw that I was having trouble, and he pulled me aside and he's like, MD stands for make a decision. You wake up in the morning, you're provided a set of information, and you make a decision. You make choices. In hindsight, those choices may be wrong. So if you don't want to make the same mistake again, you look back and you decide, what did you do differently? How can you do better next time? And so I spend a ton of time telling people, we don't make mistakes, we make choices. And when you regret your choices, go back and look and see what you would do differently so that you don't do it again. And it's not a way to absolve yourself of the responsibility for the outcome, but it's a way to process the intellectual task of like, why did this happen? Because if something bad happens through a series of events and you would make the same choices every time, you don't have anything that you can correct for next time. And maybe this was just a fait accompli. Like this was what was meant to happen and there's nothing more to offer. If there's something that you can do better, read about it, learn about it, practice it, do whatever it takes to make it better, because you don't want that to happen to the next person you take care of. So, we use the word mistakes, but I like that MD stands for make a decision, and you make choices every day and just do your best every choice. And when you get to a situation where you don't like where you're at, look back and see what choice brought me here. What do I have to change from tomorrow? And I think it's an interesting perspective on how to manage not just like patient care, but like, I chose radiology, but maybe I don't find that I'm getting satisfied by the work I'm doing in second or third year. Like maybe I need to make a different decision and choose a subspecialty or change directions, right? Like I think that we all have to recognize that like we can go back and make different choices if we can.
But I think that kind of goes back to almost that ego piece that you talked about at the beginning, right? Of, it's okay to ask people, is this the right choice? Should we be doing something different? Mm-hmm. Does anybody see something else that, we talk about that in SIM, and anybody else see anything that we need to do differently? So
yeah, totally agree.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really, really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. I'm Harley Bray, an OBGYN resident from the University of Manitoba. This is the Specialty Café Podcast, and if you are a resident in a Royal College resident affiliated program, sign up online to be a resident affiliate today.